Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Marupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So we're moving through our 6th chapter, and Hemaleka is talking to Hemachyuta. She, remember, gave the allegory of her friend who had these generations of bad company. And Hemachyuta says, ugh, how can that be anything true? Because you're just a young woman. You can't have all these generations of friends. And where is this friend? You know, my mother, the queen's never seen her. And she says, I don't say frivolous things. People like me don't do that. You need to have faith. And we've had 2 topics under discussion. The first was Shraddha, faith. The basic thing we need to do is have enough faith in the validity of the path to begin to try the process out. And one of the things we want to do is we want to think, to reason in a particular way. Jnana Yoga, the path that we are following, is a non-intellectual path for intellectuals. It's a way of thinking that gets us out of our thinking. And she briefly related the story of Sunga, the Shunyavadan, the nihilistic Buddhist who engaged the young Brahmins in false arguments which led them into nihilism. Nothing is real, nothing is true. We can't have any kind of an authority. It's all void, shunya. which tends to put people in a nihilistic and depressive state. And then the sage, Kaushala, I think his name is, comes back and says, no, 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 no. He straightens out their thinking. So last week we had a discussion on Satarka. Tarka means argument or logic or reasoning. It's used a lot in legal language as well. But Satarka here is proper reasoning, the kind of reasoning that's rooted in the teaching of the scriptures. And Hemaleka has already started him on that path through proper reasoning, by clear examination of the impermanent nature of this world. Hemachyuta has, in fact, developed a disgust for worldly pleasures. Now, he remembers in that very interesting state where he gets no joy out of the world anymore, but by force of habit, he can't stop doing it. There's no more painful state spiritually than a head full of Vedanta and a heart full of desire. Because you know you're being an idiot and you still can't stop. So she's going to again help us to get through that state. All right, Puneet, will you chant for us this evening?
Sure.
And what shloka are we on? We're in the 6th chapter, is that correct?
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. Oops.
I think
Verse
maybe
30?
Yeah, 30, verse 30.
Verse 30.
Tasman mahamina yam tam prasadhya katham bhavet mahamohasya taranam tasmatam sarvatashrayet. Therefore, how can the crossing of the great delusion happen without securing the favor of the great wielder of illusion? Therefore, let one depend upon him in every way.
So here we're talking about Maya and the incredible power of Maya. Few people successfully cross it without God's grace. And how it's important to surrender to God, to invoke God's grace. Is there a God out there who says, I like Susali today. I think I'll give her a little bit of grace. And Uday, oh no. Oh no, I'm going to withhold grace. There's no such God. God's grace, the beneficence, the Shakti, the salvific principle, the Guru shows up in myriad forms, is a constant. It is we who either surrender and avail ourselves of it, or get willful and shut ourselves off from it. It is small self in its various forms that shuts us off from grace. So listen very carefully. Prayer does not change God. Prayer changes the one who's praying. Let me repeat that. Prayer does not change God. Prayer changes the one who's praying. what does prayer do? It changes our mind states. And the most powerful of all prayers is the prayer of surrender. I'll give you the Cliff Notes, the shorthand version. I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. Or as what appears so frequently in the Christian scriptures, thy will be done. Any thoughts on this? And if you've done prayers, we can take a little side trip here. So here's a kind of prayer that many of us are taught as kids. Did I talk about this last week? I can't remember.
No.
About the oh God, please prayers?
No.
Okay. So this is the kind of prayer that many of us are taught, and we wonder why it doesn't work. We lose faith. Oh God, please make Dad give me the car so I can go out on a date with Billy or Sue. And if you do, I promise to stop smoking. Now, it can be, I promise to go on a pilgrimage, or if you make me do well on the test, or whatever it is that we're doing. And in that frame are all sorts of theological errors, which is why it doesn't work. The way you pray reveals your idea of God. You may intellectually think, oh, God this, God that. But look at the way you pray. It will reveal your theology. So let's look at that prayer and see why it doesn't work. Oh, God, please. Do you beg when you pray? What that means is you have a neurotic God. I'm God. I'm sitting here. Come on, Puneet. Beg. I love it when you beg. Makes me feel good. No, there's no such God. Susili, you didn't beg enough today. You're not getting what you want. No such God. Begging doesn't work. Don't believe me? Look to your own life. Then what do we want God to do? Manipulate another person. Make Dad do this. Make the professor do that. Make the boss do this. Make my relative get well. We think we know better. My puny little intellect. And then frequently, I have internal conflict and guilt. Oh, what I want is to get that raise and have lots of money and be superior to the other people. Well, I really shouldn't feel that way. All this conflict. Then the last thing we do is bargain. We do some sort of a bargain with God that somehow God needs something like that. Now, I'm not saying that tapas is not of value. Tapas doesn't change God. Tapas changes us. So the most powerful of all prayers is the prayer of surrender. To turn our will, to turn our lives over to God's care. And to trust the mystery of life. It's all going to work out. Any thoughts on this? Prayer works. Go ahead. Question or comment?
Jim, yeah, just a comment. I think one of the difficulties which I face, and maybe many others also do, is that the intellect is at a different place from where the heart is. And when you begin to pray, then the intellect says, but this sounds so, I mean, the intellect basically does its tricks, and so it makes the prayer become insincere. And that's a difficulty which I face.
Yes, yes. So, and the other one that becomes a problem, I'm a Vedantan, there's no personal God. And Swamiji used to say, he is the greatest of fools who maintains the existence of his ego and denies the existence of a personal God. Listen carefully. A personal God is as real as your ego. So if you feel like a person, by all means, hang on to the feet of the Lord.
Right.
There is an intelligence that's in charge of the universe. It's a beneficent universe that conspires for our well-being if we let it. But if we get in there with our resentments, our jealousies, our anger, our fear, our willfulness, our stubbornness, we shut ourselves off from that beneficence, that goodness. So you don't need to see it as a personality, but it is personal in the sense that it will enter into human hearts. And in Gita, I love what he says in the 4th chapter. In whatever way people approach me, so am I to them. So Susali and I were talking about doing the rosary before class. A rosary is a prayer to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Is she real or is she not real? Well, she's both. She's a divine idea, but she's one of God's faces. What about Balakrishna? Is that real or not? If that's the way you relate to the divine, it's as real as your ego. Oh, Ganesh, my friend Dave Dutt's mother. I stayed with her for a while in 2015 when I was there. Absolutely adored Lord Krishna. Had so many murtis of, not Krishna, of Ganesh all over her house. She loves Lord Ganesh because he's the remover of obstacles. If that's the way you approach the divine, oh Lord, you are the remover of sorrows, of obstacles. God will be that. God has thousands and thousands of faces. And in the end, it is not that which you worship here, it's yourself. So don't let the intellectual inconsistency, I'm a Vedantan, there is no personal God, but I have a terrible life. That's nuts. And it's perfectly okay to pray to whom it may concern. I have no idea who you are, what you are. I'm not even sure I believe in you. But I'm going to make an attempt to give my heart to you. You can't piss God off. Don't worry about it. I don't know if that's useful, is it?
Oh yes, it's funny and useful.
Okay, So the most important thing to understand, prayer does not change God. Prayer changes the one who's praying. Once we understand that, we pray differently. And what Hemaleka is saying here is the most powerful prayer is the prayer of surrender. It invokes God's grace. I can, she can, I think I'll let her, to the mother. All right, next verse.
Yastam prasadayet samyak prapyatasya prasadatah mahavidyam satanmohad dhruvamut kranti meshyati. Whoever can duly secure his favor, he, having obtained the supreme knowledge, certainly goes out of that delusion through his favor.
So, practically speaking, we have these preparatory exercises that purify the head and the heart. In Gita, we've been doing chapters 3, we're into chapter 4. The value of doing karma yoga to purify the equipment. Another great practice for purifying the heart is devotion. Spiritual practices of devotion opens up our love. Opens up our love. If any of you have had teenage children, you may know this condition. So your kids go off to college. At least this is in the United States. I don't know if it's the same in India. And then on semester break, your kids come home and they usually have a big bag of dirty laundry and they go in and dump it there for mommy to do the laundry. And then they say, "What's for dinner?" Because they want mommy to cook. And then somewhere in the visit, they go visit daddy and say, "I'm short of funds. Can you help me out?" They want daddy to write a check. So they go to their parents out of love, but also to get stuff. Parents don't mind. Mommy does the laundry, cooks good meals. She loves us. Daddy writes the check. Could be the other round in these homes. Daddy could do the laundry and mommy could write the check. Have a non-traditional home too. But then as kids get older and they establish their own houses, there comes a time when the young man or woman comes home. "Oh, I just want to go visit my mom and my dad. Just because I love them, I want to be in their presence." It's no longer transactional. So in the beginning, many of us will do puja or do prayers to get stuff from the Lord. No harm in that. God doesn't care whatever our motivation is to turn. But after a while, we start to go into meditation, or we may do our ritual prayers, chant some mantras, just out of love of God, not wanting anything in return, but just out of love. Many of you may have seen a very famous image of Hanuman embracing Lord Ram. And Hanuman's just hugging Ram, and the look on his face is one of just incredible peace and bliss. Ram, on the other hand, is completely neutral and dispassionate. Now, what's the symbolism? Hanuman is our mind. Where is it happiest and most satisfied? In the embrace of the self. That's the mystical understanding of that. And that's the deep purpose of worship, of love. At some point, if you wish, we can go more deeply into this. There's a fabulous scripture called the Narada Bhakti Sutra, which is all about levels of devotion, prema. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, this is Ravi.
Yes.
Just a quick observation on the earlier prayer and the devotion. When I was a teenager, we used to pray for favors, and at least there used to be a saying that you put 50% of your effort, 50% from the God. At least personally, it helped. But it helped in a way is that you put your faith in the God, and then you pretty much put your 100% of your effort, and then either you get a success or whatever, and you attribute the success to the God. Okay, that's one way. Okay, the other one is the prayer or the devotion. It helps when you are really into the devotional, when you chant something, it takes the edge off your ahankara. So that
absolutely. I agree.
That's all.
So
yeah.
you've illustrated exactly my example about the teenagers going to their parents with the dirty laundry and the needing a check. That's how young people go to God. Now, the problem is some people will go to God with that kind of motivation, and it seems like their prayers are not answered, and then they lose faith. Let's say their sister gets cancer, and they go to the God and they pray and they do puja. Oh, please heal my sister, please heal my sister. And sister dies. And then they have a crisis of faith. So that's always the problem with that. We think we know best.
And also, Jim, there could be another turn, because originally it could be that we are praying for devotion, but then later on, like in my experience, that lately I was using the rosary to just train the mind to stay focused.
Yeah, that's
bring
fine.
back the mind. But I was using it like that, and then instead something happened with the praying, that I was in a different place that I had never been. So even though my intention was, to keep the mind focused, something else happened during that prayer.
And in whatever way we turn to the infinite, it's all good. It's all good. Whatever takes our mind out of the world as a solution and turns the mind towards God or the self as a solution, that's going to be efficacious. That's going to be efficacious. All right, any other thoughts on this? Now, Ravi, I want to add a little bit of another part of the teaching, which we will get to later in this text.
Yeah.
There is a word in Sanskrit which is almost intranslatable. The word sankalpa. It means wish, will, thought, intention. The law of sankalpa is this: any sankalpa consistently maintained that isn't contradicted or conflicted tends towards grossification, tends towards manifestation. In the Christian tradition, Jesus clearly said, whatsoever you ask believing, so shall you receive. Now we'll get into why all this works. But eventually, a yogi can choose to make a difference in the world through a disciplined sankalpa. That's different than begging the god. But if you believe, the god will answer your prayer. The belief is what's operative, not the god.
Okay.
Did that make some sense
Yes.
to you, Ravi?
Yes, it did. The other way, I don't know, I'm sure you're talking about down the road, but I'm assuming it will be like the God will work through you to get what you wanted to achieve through Sankalpa.
Well,
No?
we'll get to it. I don't want to
Okay,
get too
yeah,
sidetracked. There are whole stories in the scripture about this. We can put it this way. Yoga thunders that this world is like a dream. Some Mahatmas just stand back and it's not real, so it really doesn't matter. Others in the Tantra tradition say, yes, it's a dream, but it doesn't have to be a nightmare. And we have some possibility to do some dream shaping. We can have an intention to make a difference in the world. Now, some of you have done Vipassana retreats. I know Puneet has done some, and Susali has done some. Have any of you others been on Vipassana retreats?
No, I haven't, Jim.
No, I
Okay,
haven't.
Puneet, there's a prayer that's frequently done. Isn't it called the Metta prayer?
That's right.
And what is the Metta prayer? This is a Buddhist prayer.
It's a prayer you do towards the end of the retreat, where you wish for the well-being of the entire world, all the living beings, and you wish that they would all reach liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would you bother to do that? Do you think it works?
Is that a question you're asking?
It is a question. It's a real question.
I'm guessing because people, our intentions are aligned at the time when they're praying.
You got it. It is a sankalpa. And it does make a difference, especially when groups of people do a prayer like that, which is in alignment with the universal Dharma. You're plugging in to the power source. That's Tantra. It's what it is. Or in Tibetan Buddhist practice, any of you practice Tonglen? Inhaling the sorrow of someone or some situation and exhaling the antidote, peace, etc., or healing. Does it work? Whatever it is, it's Tantra. It's dream shaping. It's an attempt to understanding that the whole ground of being of the material world is just consciousness, it's just vibration held together by thought. But it responds to sankalpa. Consistent thought that isn't conflicted or contradicted. All right, let's put that on the shelf, and we'll be dealing with that much more later on in the book. Next verse.
Anyepi yoga kathita shreya sadhana karmani maheshwara prasadate vinana syu phalaptyate. Even other spiritual disciplines have been described in the execution of the means for achieving the highest good. Without the grace of the great Lord, they cannot be useful for obtaining the fruit.
Read the first part again. I'm not sure I understood that verse.
Even other spiritual disciplines have been described in the execution of the means for achieving the highest good. Without the grace of the great Lord, they cannot be useful for obtaining the fruit.
Yes. So basically what he's saying is God's sankalpa overcomes everything. So other disciplines, we have a limited creativity. For example, I had someone come and talk to me, and they were reading a book. I think it was Autobiography of a Yogi or some book like that. And he does yoga asana, he does hatha yoga. And he was saying, oh, golly, these yogis, they send the kundalini up through a hollow in the brain, and they live 400 years. Wouldn't that be incredible to live 400 years? So I said to him, John, what happens at year 401? They're dead. Because the Lord's sankalpa is everybody dies. Whether it's 40 years or 400 years. In the grand scheme of things, it's the blink of an eye. I'm going to do special mantra. I'm only 5'3" and I want to be 6 feet tall. I've yet to find anybody who's been able to change their height 6, 8, 9 inches. Wear platform shoes if you must. But there are many things in our lives that are not etched in stone, that we can change. Let me give you a very worldly example. I'm going to draw on your experience if you don't mind, Puneet. Puneet used to work at this place called the Learning Guild. And it was, correct me if I've got it wrong, but you were teaching computer programming to largely marginalized communities. And you had spoken with me once about some of these kids would have what I think you called imposter syndrome. Is that correct?
That's right.
Tell us what imposter syndrome is and what you guys as teachers did to help these kids.
So imposter syndrome isn't limited only to kids. Like, I think anyone could have it. It's essentially a belief that you have where you feel you're not good enough in the situation that you're in. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's any aspect of life, and you feel like an imposter. And you're always doubting whether you'll succeed or doubting your abilities. So you end up not performing well because you're fighting with your mind all the time.
And what's the antidote? What would you do to support them or help them?
So we used to remind the students that, you know, you can do it, give them examples of times when they've actually done well. So then they start to have confidence in their abilities, and they can not keep thinking about the imposter syndrome and think about doing the work and believing in themselves.
So this is a real world example, not spiritual in the woo-woo sense, of this law of sankalpa. So they come into the situation with a sankalpa. I can do this. People like me don't do this. I'm an imposter. That's the sankalpa. And at the guild, one of your jobs was to change that sankalpa, meaning their deeply rooted belief was altered by the evidence of them doing well, and by you building up their confidence, and by the support of their colleagues, etc. But there's a real world example of how this law works. Any thoughts on this from anybody?
Just to comment, in some of these undergraduate classes which I teach, which have many students, more than 100, I often tell them, I often find that they too suffer from this imposter syndrome in a different way. They feel that they have somehow managed to join the university, which is very difficult to get into, but they didn't really deserve to be there. And so when the time for examinations come around, they become hostage to the imposter syndrome and feel that they don't really deserve to be there, but somehow they managed to get in and now they're going to fail. So I've had very similar conversations with them as well in trying to, you know, remind them of things that they've done well and move on.
And another one, 90% of success in life is just showing up. If you come to class and do the homework, you'll probably do well.
There's a beautiful poem from Hafiz that says something about how did the rose ever open its heart, and it says it needed the encouragement of the sun against its being.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's beautiful.
Anyway, my whole point here is this law of sankalpa is incredibly practical. This is what Swamiji used to call by the term the art of man-making. We could say the art of human making, the art of culturing the person. So this thing called a human being, your body, your mind, your intellect, is an art form. And you have your 70, 80, 90 years. What are you going to do with this thing called a human life? Build something beautiful with it. And you build it thought by thought. It is the temple made without hands. It is the temple not made of stone, but a temple made thought by thought. What are you going to do? Is your temple going to be self-pity, regret, fear, anger, jealousy? Or is there going to be something that contributes to life, that brings joy and peace and beauty into your particular given life circumstances? Be an artist. And we're all doing it, whether we know it or not. So if you do not know about the law of sankalpa, but your habituated thought life is, nobody loves me, Everything is terrible. I fail at everything. My life is just horrible. God goes, yes. That's your sankalpa. But if your sankalpa is, I live and I move and I have my being in the infinite God, whose nature is Satchidananda, all is Maya and all is bliss. God goes, yes. You choose. All right, next verse.
तस्मादाराधये दादौ महेशं विश्वकारणं भक्त्या स साधये दाशु योगान् मोहविनाशनान्. Therefore, let one worship at first the great Lord who is the cause of the universe with devotion. He would quickly cause the spiritual disciplines which destroy the delusion to be accomplished.
So if you love God and worship, if you turn your mind to the Lord, that love invokes the grace which will eventually begin to turn your mind inward towards the infinite. Next verse.
एतत् जगत् कार्यभूतं प्रत्यक्षं परिदृश्यते सांशमेवं पृथिव्याद्यं दृष्टारम्भमलयलम्. This world is directly seen as produced by action, that is, it is in effect the necessary result of a cause. Though having an unseen beginning completely, earth and other elements together with their divisions are so.
So what she's referring to here is what we call the Pancha Karanam, the fivefold division and recombination of the Tanmatras. Oh, what in God's name is this? I used to struggle with this idea. So the five elements are earth, air, fire, water, and space, akasha, or sky, or ether. And I would say that's just the ancients. Earth is not an element. Helium is an element. Oxygen is an element. Fire is not an element. And I struggled with this. And I would discount this part of the teaching. And then it was Swami Tejomayananda who helped me out there. The Tanmatras, earth, air, fire, water, and space, are rooted in this yogic idea that the phenomenal world, the Jagat, is consciousness. So here in my living room, I'm looking at the coffee table. It's a rosewood coffee table. Wood is made largely of cellulose. Cellulose is mostly carbon. So we would say that's the makeup, the elemental nature of my coffee table. But if I dreamt about the rosewood coffee table, what would the coffee table of my dream be made of? Well, it would be made of earth, which is smellability. I just polished the table with lemon oil. I can smell the lemon oil. We say earth is smell because in an agricultural environment, when you plow the field, you can smell the rich earth. Air. Air is touchability. I can feel the air on my skin. I can reach out and take my hand and touch the coffee table of my dream. Fire. Fire is seeability. I can see the coffee table with its shape, its 4 legs and flat top. Water. Well, I was actually eating some chips and salsa before class, and I spilled salsa on the table. Take my finger. Yep, salsa. I can taste what's there. That's water, because you can taste water. And space, or sky, sound. So everything in our dream, which is a subtle world, is a combination of seeability, tasteability, touchability, smellability, hearability. And what she's saying here is the physical world is just a more dense grossification of it. So the elements describe the yogic notion of perception. In the dream state, remember, you are the god of your dream. It is your one mind that manifests as the seer, the seeing, and the object seen. Go through all the 5 senses that way. It is mind stuff, chitta, appearing as that triple factor, the triple D. Hemaleka is saying, in the end, this is no different. So that is the deep yogic theory behind what we call the Pancha Karana, the 5-fold division and subsequent recombination of the subtle elements into their grossified form called this world. Any thoughts or questions about that?
It's just very heady.
The main thing to understand, Susili, is this. When you look at the phenomenal world, your ego says all that stuff is out there. But when you dream, you have the same kind of experience. All the stuff in the dream world seems to be out there. You've got a dream body and a dream ego, and you look out of the dream body and you see the dream world. Isn't that your experience?
Yes.
But is it real? Is it solid stuff? If you dream about a couch or you dream about your daughter, are they really out there, or are they really just consciousness appearing as those things? And what yoga wants to say is, this world is no different. There's nothing solid out there. It's just vibration held together by thought.
Thank you, Jim.
That's the whole point of it all. Now, the world you see may be very different, for example, than the world an octopus or a shark sees. They have different senses. We've only got the 5 we know about. Who knows? what we cannot perceive because we don't have the senses. All right, next verse. Any other thoughts on the idea of the subtle elements becoming grossified and becoming the physical world? Going on.
कार्यं स्यादिति तर्केण बह्वागं दृढेन तु व्यवस्येतन्त्र कर्तारं सर्वकर्तृ विलक्षणम्. Let one be convinced that they are the effect by reasoning confirmed by many scriptures, and under those circumstances, their maker is one who is different from all other makers.
So, the idea that she's getting at here is the author of the universe is different than people who make stuff in the world. You've got a maker, an efficient cause, you've got, an instrumental cause, how they make it, and a material cause, what they make it out of. The potter is the efficient cause. The potter's wheel is the instrumental cause. The mud is the material cause for making a mud pot. But when it comes to this world, it's very different. What does the Lord make the world out of? What instrument does he use? This becomes easy to understand again if you go to the dream state. You are the God of your dream. You do not make the dream the way a potter makes a pot. You are the efficient cause. You make the dream. What do you make it out of? You. And the objects in the dream are you appearing as a dream world of name and form. So this comes about in the same way. The Lord does not make the world the way a potter makes a pot. It comes about by means of sankalpa. The Lord imagines the universe. And again, there's enormous ramifications of that philosophical idea. Let me just give you one thing. Years ago, we're going back, 50 years. I used to belong to this metaphysical group. And we were doing in a class this practices to prove that the world responds to our thought. And I might try it again. And what we did in those days is we would take bean sprouts and we would have 3 pie tins. And in those days, you used to, wet the bean sprouts, soak them, and put them on in the pie tin on wet paper towels, and then cover them with paper towels and keep them moist. And 1 pie tin, you would curse every day. You're dumb, stupid sprouts. You can't grow. You're out of alignment with life. You're hateful. You're horrible. The second one, you love and bless. You are beautiful. You are wonderful. You are full of the life of God. You grow fabulously. The third was your control. You leave it alone. And then after a week or two, you take a look, and it's freaky to see How dumb bean sprouts respond to thought. How the ones you bless grow so much more full than the ones you curse. Now, those are just bean sprouts. Think of what happens to our children. You're a bad little girl. How dare you do that? Go to your room. You're stupid. You'll never amount to anything. And a child's mind is so much more responsive than a bean sprout. Try the exercise. All right. Any thoughts on this?
It's a good homework assignment, Jim.
Yeah. Okay, it is now 8:30. Time for, what number are we on, Puneet, for next week?
We're going to do 35 next week.
35, okay. We didn't get too far tonight, but I think we had some very, very important material in this chapter. Any other thoughts or questions about any of the stuff we've covered tonight? So your assignment, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. In Judaism, that's the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Don't take the content of your mind frivolously. Don't be afraid of your mind, but choose to be kind. Choose to forgive. Choose to wish people well, even people that you're having trouble with. Try to love as God loves. God has no taste. God loves people that you and I would probably have nothing to do with. Once you begin to understand this law of sankalpa, any sankalpa consistently maintained, you got to keep it up, that isn't conflicted or contradicted. You think one way one day, and then 10 minutes later, you're thinking the opposite. You diffuse your power. And if you think along the lines of love and peace, more creativity, more expression, more harmony, what the prophet Isaiah called the peaceable kingdom, you're plugging into an incredible power source. How did negative thinking get in our heads in the first place? Through repetition. So it may take a bit of time to undo some of them. They're habituated. Here's another law of sankalpa, a corollary. Whatever you look at, I call it the law of the third eye, the attentive faculty. Whatever you look at, you're going to think about. Whatever you look at repeatedly, you will think about repeatedly. Repeated thought becomes habituated thought. Habituated thought sinks into the unconscious and becomes a sankalpa, the law of our life. Where we have the great power is what we choose to pay attention to. All right. No questions?